First. Take it for a second.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Clydesdale Area Committee, and to those who are watching us virtually, and welcome to you as well. I can't see you. Oh, no, don't see you until you speak. So anyway, so I want to invite Tracy to run through the procedural issues. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to go over some procedures because we're using a new system. So it's just to remind you to press to activate your mic, but it won't come on right away. The Chair will activate it when she invites you to speak. From those joining remotely, I would just remind members that there's a slight delay from activating your mic to you actually being able to speak. And if you do, I would suggest that you leave your mic on until you've finished your question, just because of that lag, in case you have to come back in again for a counter question. If you need to get the attention of the Chair or the Clerk, if you use the chat function, which is on the top right-hand side, and it's the middle button, if you've got a point of order or anything like that, you can use that to get a message to the Chair. Also, just to remind you that the meeting will be live-streamed and recorded. Where a member has a declaration of interest and you're required to leave the meeting, if you could let me know when you're about to leave the meeting, and once that item has been dealt with, we'll either send you an email, a Teams chat or a text message to let you know that you can rejoin the meeting again. If you have any IT problems, if you could text, I'll give you this number, it's 07385 370089, and we'll try and get IT to assist. I believe there's been a few updates recently, so they've asked that in the first instance you try to do a restart, and then if you're still having a problem, if you text that number and we'll try to help you. So I'll just ask for the recording and live stream to start. Right, that's me got an indication started. So I'll now take the steering for the Clydesdale Area Committee on the 17th of August 2022. In the meeting we have Councillors Alex Allison, Ralph Barker, Poppy Corbett, Ross Gowland, Lindsay Hamilton, Mark Horsham, Ross Lambie, Richard Lockhart, apologies from Eileen Logan, Julia Mars is in the meeting, we have apologies from Ian McCallan, and also in the meeting is Catherine McClymont and David Shearer. I'll hand you back to the Chair now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. So the first item of business is the declarations of interest. Is there anybody who would like to declare an interest? Thanks. I don't see any lights in this fancy screen, so I'm presuming nobody's going to declare an interest. Thank you. So the second item of business is the minutes of the previous meetings, pages 3 to 6. Are they approved? How do we know that, Tracy? Could you just speak? All right, if you want to just speak up if you think, if you've put your light on, if you've got any questions. No? Okay, that's quick. So we're straight on to item 3, which is Police Scotland, and a presentation by Chief Inspector Tony Gallagher and Inspector Paul Doyle. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us and allowing us to present today. My name is Inspector Paul Doyle. I'm currently the Community Policing Inspector based at Hamilton, and for the past couple of months I've been covering the Clydesdale area as Tony Gallagher is doing his temporary Chief Inspector. I'm going to pass you over to Tony just to do a bit of an introduction, and then I'll talk you through the rest of the slides.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the invite to the meeting today. I know a few of the councillors who have been announced there just prior to that know me as well here. So, yeah, a couple of things just before we get into the actual presentation from Paul. We are, of course, coming back out now from COVID and starting to now engage with councillors, hopefully, and members of the public in more of the meetings face-to-face. And I'm looking forward to engage with some of our new councillors who have just been elected recently as well in that regard. I just want to say, for the benefit of the members here and also for the councillors present, we are entering a period now where we're looking to determine what our new priorities will be for the division here, and I would urge any members who have an interest in contributing to that, to utilise some of the material that we have posted out in public, either come to the police office and pick it up, or you'll find it in most of the public accessible areas here. And although I can't for the benefit of you kind of show you this, but I have some leaflets here today to leave here in the council building to the front of that, and there is the QR code that can be utilised to access that questionnaire. So this is a good opportunity for people to determine what the priorities are for policing within their areas. And I would encourage everybody to take advantage of that material. As I said, if they are looking for it, then we can have it accessible from the police office, but certainly police officers themselves will be distributing it within their communities, and hopefully from there we'll try and utilise some local media as well to get that QR code out there. That's all I really want to contribute myself. Obviously, I'm available for questions at the end of the input, but I'll hand you over to Paul now, just to get through the presentation.
Thank you. I'm here today representing not only our community policing teams, but also our response policing teams. We are from Q Division, which covers the Lanarkshire area, and we're supported both locally and nationally by other specialist officers such as our Criminal Investigation Department, our Traffic Departments, and other specialist roles. Within Lanarkshire, we currently have 4 key priorities names. The first one, if you go to the next slide, please, is reducing violence and disorder within our community. The second one is public protection and protecting people at risk of harm. The third is going to be tackling housebreaking and acquisitive crime. And the fourth one is reducing the harm caused by substance misuse within our communities. Now, I should say, as the Chief Inspector just highlighted, these aims were for the period of 2022 to 2023, and currently we are under consultation to see how that will be driven forward depending on the community needs as identified through this survey we have ongoing. Next slide, please. We're currently coming out of the pandemic, and we're looking to re-engage along with our partners in the communities in a meaningful way and in person more often with the groups and communities that we serve. Although COVID for us and the pandemic for Police Scotland was largely business as usual, throughout the pandemic most of our meetings were moved on to MS Teams, and we're looking to start getting more face-to-face engagement. Going forward, the community sergeant based for the Clydesdale area, Richard Jury, will be organising more face-to-face meetings and looking to seek better engagement with our community groups, with our partners and elected members, and driving that forward in a face-to-face manner where appropriate. We've also noticed that nationally, demand has changed for Police Scotland. 73% of the incidents reported to us related to no-crime incidents rather than acts of criminality. And just to clarify what we mean by that, we're talking about an increase in missing person inquiries, vulnerable person inquiries, people looking for advice, assisting our partners in their duties, and also distress brief intervention incidents regarding mental health. If we go on to the next slide, please. Ultimately, we're seeking to utilise a holistic approach in terms of partnership working, and we're doing that in order to be as cost effective as possible whilst ensuring the best level of service can be provided to the communities that we're policing. We're trying to engage with our partners and communities to share information and resources where applicable, and we're ensuring that our safety plans are implemented for our vulnerable persons and that preventative action is sought and enforcement is robust with repeat offenders. What we mean by partnership working on a grassroots level can be as simple as reacting to vandalism, where members of the public are notifying us of this crime. We're investigating it, but we're also working with South Lanarkshire Council Environmental Services to have that removed, and then attending with our elected members and feeding back the results that we have for them. More involved examples are our weekly hub meetings, which involve Scottish Fire and Rescue, our local authority housing, and anti-social investigation teams, where a member of Police Scotland will meet with them on a weekly basis in order to identify problem tenants, hotspots, locations, in order to identify them early and identify issues, and then work in partnership in order to resolve these. If we go to the next slide, please. Talking specifically then about our 4 aims, taking first reducing violence and disorder. Locally, we've reviewed our policing plans to ensure that we're intelligence-led at all times. We're putting officers in the right place at the right time with the right resources. We're listening to our communities and elected members and then reacting to that and feeding back the results to them. We're analysing our crime trends and locations, and we're taking on our offenders and locations to identify prior deployments so that we're getting an effective utilisation of resources. And we're policing our curfew bails as set by the courts as well. This is often going to mean additional high visibility patrols, and often we're going to be using resources from our mounted, our DAVRU, our Divisional Anti-Violence Reduction Unit, our quad bikes that we have based at Larkhall Police Office, and other specialist resources that we have to hand. But it's not always going to be focused on enforcement as well. We have implemented a number of diversionary inputs, such as our summer football initiative, whereby we work closely with South Lanarkshire Council, Universal Connections and Tesco stores to identify 60 youths and bring them into playing football with community officers and other trained personnel within the Biggar and Carluke high schools. And we did notice a reduction in youth disorder and criminality in the 4-week period that we had that running. If we go to the next slide, please. Next, if we go to protecting people at risk of harm, we have ongoing multi-agency meetings regularly with social work, health, education and youth workers in order to tackle a variety of issues, as we understand that policing isn't the only resource available to deal with these matters. In regards to this, we've had a number of road safety campaigns around the schools involving the travel to and from schools and parking in order to educate parents and children. Our community policing officers have also engaged with local groups such as the Kirkton Parish Church Scout Group, so that we're getting in early and we're speaking to young people and we're highlighting the work that the police do within the communities and how we support people. Importantly, prior to the breakup of term, we initiated a summer water safety campaign where we went into the schools and we gave briefings along with Community Safety Department from the Police, Scottish Fire and Rescue, Scottish Ambulance and the Open Water Rescue Group. We held a day of action at Lanark Loch, which was well attended and gathered a lot of social media coverage and was covered in the local gazette as well. So again, we could pass that safety message out to the wider community. In terms of road safety, following a number of complaints from our elected members, a unit-powered gun, which is essentially a speed gun, has been purchased in order to help with the road safety campaigns that we plan on doing in the future. And prior to getting that, we had 3 specific days of action, which led to multiple offences being detected and education passed along with enforcement to other road users. If we go to the next slide, please. Discussing then housebreaking and acquisitive crime, our community police have had a couple of days of action to detect and deter thefts of fuel, which we saw rising. Multiple vehicles were stopped in relation to this and several offences were detected. Community policing and response also assisted our PACT team in the identification of 3 males who were involved in 31 thefts of motor vehicles, and these males have now been reported onto the courts. A male has also been arrested within the Biggar area for 12 counts of a Section 57 Civic Government Scotland Act and 1 theft by housebreaking. In terms of the Civic Government Scotland Act, it's basically a suspect person within the curtilage of a property. And again, his case is currently sitting with the court services. And 2 further males were reported for 7 theft by shopliftings. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. Our last aim is obviously reducing the harm caused by substance misuse, which is obviously a priority for the Scottish Government as well, given the fact that Scotland features as having the highest level of drug deaths within Europe. On that, a warrant was executed whereby 1.9 kilograms of cannabis with a street value of £19,000 was recovered from an address. An accused is currently remanded in custody at present for that offence. 89.75 grams of cannabis was recovered during another drug search. MDA offences and firearms offences were both reported in relation to another drug search where a .22 air rifle was also recovered. A further warrant led to 47 separate bags of 2 grams of cannabis deals with a street value of £940 being recovered from a separate address. and half a kilo of cocaine and 1.2 kilograms of cannabis recovered during another drug search. If we go to the next slide, please. In terms of other initiatives and events that Police Scotland are engaging with in the Clydesdale area, and focusing as well on diversionary activities, so it's not just about enforcement but also looking at education as well. We engaged with a summer fun day at St Mary's Nursery, where the community policing engaged with 3 to 5-year-olds and played a number of games in order to increase community presence and gain that interaction, and again give some further education on policing, our priorities and what we do within our communities. We're currently working closely with South Lanarkshire anti-social teams regarding reports of disorder within the Lanark area, where we've engaged an action plan, we've sought additional police resources, we're utilising our quad bikes and support services, and we're also engaging with our community safety departments so that after any offences are detected, we're giving that comfort to members of our community and advice and reassurance delivered through them. Our community policing teams are also engaging in a new pilot developed by South Lanarkshire Asset to refer youths to antisocial behaviour teams. Again, this is designed to find an early and effective resolution to youth disorder, to provide community reassurance, to provide robust policing to repeat offenders, and signpost diversion activities to young persons to deter them away from criminality. If we go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, just on that, before we go to the next slide, if I could go back one actually, just to mention quickly the Junior COP programme, which we're also running within the Greater Hamilton area, and we're looking to roll out to Clydesdale as well. And this is a number of schools in Hamilton have already engaged with this programme. A further 4 schools will be re-engaging with it upon the schools returning this month. And it's a 5-week programme that gives youths an insight into policing whilst building leadership and confidence as well. We go to the last slide again, thank you. I put this in for information as well, that we're also involved in a drug collection scheme within the greater area. What this is, to reduce the rather wordy paragraph up there, is essentially a means of early warning for the police and our partners. We're engaging with local licensed premises, we're giving them amnesty drug bins, and we're giving them briefs on the fact that if they are recovering drugs from patrons either entering the premise or they're finding drugs within, they place them in the amnesty bin, we collect them, we weigh them, we have them analysed, and we notice drug trends and perhaps harmful drugs within the community so that we can engage in education and we can inform our local partners, both locally and widespread throughout Scotland, of any emerging trends or risks. And so far, we've gathered intelligence about MDMA trends, cocaine and ketamine within our communities. Thank you. This ends the presentation that I have for you today, but we're certainly more than happy to take any questions that you might have for us.
Thanks very much for that from both of you at Police Scotland. Does anybody have any questions or comments they would like to make?
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Hiya. Thanks so much for that informative presentation. I'm one of the new councillors just elected at this last election. Have you started going to community meetings in terms of your community policing team? Have you been going since the pandemic and since we've reopened? Have you started? And also, I think Tommy was the contact for Clydesdale South for my ward, and I think he's moved on. Would it be you two, or would it be Richard Jury that in terms of I would contact as a councillor?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Hi, Councillor. As Paul pointed out there, my base post is the Clydesdale area, so I will effectively be the area inspector for Clydesdale. It's nice to meet you, and congratulations on your election. Your first question with regards to engaging with the public again, this has started, but it's tentative. A lot of the groups aren't meeting in the same numbers that they were before, and this is something that myself and Paul are looking for our officers to encourage them to do so, to go out and invite them to do so. At this moment in time, as I said, in terms of our divisional priorities that are now getting reassessed, if you like, in terms of where people would like their priorities to go. That is essential that we do that we do that via committee forums. That personally speaking, I think it's important that we get a wide variety of persons rather than the same persons who will routinely commit to this, because we get a wider picture from it. And in that regard, we will go out and effectively look to engage the public at these committee forums. So yes, it has started. It's very limited presently. It's not where I would like it to be presently, but we will improve that in the coming months. And I think that's understandable coming out the pandemic. I don't think we've really seen some clear distance between the conclusion of that to where we are just now. I think there is still some obviously issues around the COVID pandemic, but yeah, I do anticipate that we will reinstate where we were before, really, and coming up, and that will include myself and yourself having more conversations. And just on your other point you made with regards to Sergeant Tommy McCauley, yes, he's moved on to J Division now, out with our division. The new sergeant will be Stuart MacDonald, who's already been identified. He moves into post on the 28th of this month. He's presently on annual leave.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, that's working okay. We're still getting used to this system as well. Right, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate the police are supposed to do practically everything, and they're not always well supported. But if you could comment on one thing, now it's not the detail of it, but a householder, problems with being in a private estate, problems with being threatened, and being threatened at his door by teenagers. My advice, if it's a nuisance, it's counsel. If it's a threat or actual violence or damage, it's a crime. Anyway, phone 999, and several days later, nothing at all. Nothing come back, absolutely nothing. Cannot help feeling that if he had reacted, and I don't think it's strong enough to have reacted with violence, I'm quite sure something would have happened if he'd taken it out on the teenagers. I just wonder if you could comment that, what should I do in that situation? What should he do in that situation where they're actually being threatened at his own door? Thanks.
Well, thank you for your question. I think the advice you've given him in the first stage is entirely appropriate, and I'm more than happy to get some more details from you afterwards in order that we can see how we can help this member of the community. Answering the second part of your question about what you should do, I think phoning the police is entirely appropriate and correct, and if you're not getting the response that you were looking for, certainly phoning us back or encouraging members of the public to go to yourself and then come and speak to one of us via either phone call or contact us via email would be great, and we'll certainly do our best to get in touch with you in a timeliest manner and see how we can assist and help you.
You happy with that response, Rob? Right.
Yes, thanks. We'll do that. I'll get detail, or he will get details to you. I mean, if you just want to let him know, exactly where it should send any details to. I think it's an ongoing problem. Is it okay, Chair, if I ask another question completely different? And sorry.
Yeah, exactly what Paul said there in terms of that, but just to add a wee bit additional to that, yeah, it's obviously a specific circumstance you're talking about that we need more information on, but in the general sense of what you're talking about being threatened at the door, depends on the perception of that threat at the time that it's made. If you feel threatened to the point where it's an emergency, 999 is an appropriate call to make. If it's not and you feel it's maybe an ongoing matter that you're having to deal with, then 101 is the proper system to use for that. Now, in that set of circumstance, if it's a neighbour dispute, community policing will take that up and deal with that and engage with the parties involved in that particular subject. If it is an area which is causing us particular issues in the wider sense, not just that person itself, we will, through our deployment plans, our night shift plans, weekend policing plans, target areas such as that, with additional resource should it be arising as a problem area for us and for the residents that are staying there. This, in the sense of being antisocial rather than a kind of physical threat, if you like, just to go back to some of the content of the actual presentation here in terms of a holistic approach, that is very much the case. And circumstances like this may well appear on our hub discussions, which involve members, South Lanarkshire Council, our antisocial investigation teams as well, which have been extremely effective in removing some of these parties from their addresses who have been causing problems. On top of that as well, in conjunction with, in partnership with South Lanarkshire Council, we have CCTV facilities that are put in place temporarily to deal with some of the issues that we've got. The likes of Patterson Drive in Law has benefited from that, and some the areas in Lark Hall as well have benefited from that. So, yeah, the unique circumstances of that may need a different approach, but that's something we can talk about in the future if you provide the details for that. But in the general sense, yeah, holistic approaches to these things have worked for us in the past and will continue to do so.
Yes, thanks for that. The householder feels he and his family were threatened. I don't think people phone 999 likely, and it is not a housing area where you would expect threats of violence. But anyway, if we can deal with that, I think that now the householder has been felt really let down. It would be a good idea if we could, clear it up. And I'm not the best person, to do that, obviously. Chair, is it okay if I just a completely different question and slightly lighter? Right.
Ralph, there's only one more waiting.
Okay, right. Roads authorities, including ours, spend ages working out the exact speed limits they should put on roads. And it's all completely pointless because it just isn't enforced. And again, the police cannot do everything. But, I mean, what really do you think about, all these speed limits that I would say 99% of drivers ignore? And I'm often overtaken in these areas now. Every now and then somebody gets points and a fine. But basically, most drivers really take very little notice. And what can we do about it?
Yeah, the figure of 99% is kind of, I'm sure that's arrived at yourself. I'm not sure whether I've actually seen that. The perception of that, I'm sure is what you're referring to there. Yeah, road traffic issues are a large issue, particularly in the Clydesdale area itself. We're aware of that. We do have focused road traffic engagement using our guns, Paul referred to in the presentation there of the purchase of the Unipar gun to assist my deployment of additional resources. We already have that equipment, but that was actually done in conjunction. I'm sure Councillor Horsham is on here as well, who's also aware of that and was involved in that. That resource was bought specifically to add to what we already had to allow us to put officers out there more routinely and engage in various areas that our stats were telling us that there were particular problem areas for speeding. But that also is informed by a safety camera partnership. And this, it'd be surprising actually the stats you get back in some cases that perhaps where you think there's a particular problem, we put out, with our colleagues, we put out some speed measuring mechanisms, and what comes back actually gives a different story to what that perception is. So I don't disagree with you. There is a lot of it ongoing just now, but we are trying our best, and I suppose this is where I kind of try and manage expectations. Police Scotland, like every other organisation, is facing fiscal issues just now, and that represents obviously the financial side of it in properties, but also in personnel. So we are heavily reliant upon our colleagues and our partners in terms of what we are trying to do out there. Road traffic, I'm absolutely certain will appear again as a priority within South Lanarkshire, because that's the area that we're dealing with here. But I can assure you that we are deploying when these areas of problems are identified. I can't always say that deployment is then married to a huge number of fixed penalty tickets or endorsements. Again, just to kind of give an idea of that, when you are putting out a resource such as a speed gun or whatever, very quickly drivers become aware of the application, you have to move it on. So there are various there's various contributing factors as to why some of the figures you don't see are large. In some areas you would expect to do so. So there is ongoing traffic awareness inputs, again, as you heard during the presentation, and we are also, of course, heavily involved in the enforcement side of that. So we'll continue to do so, and all I would ask yourself then, again, if there is a specific area of concern that you have, that if you come into either myself or Paul, we'll make sure that we put the resources to that to see if we can bring some alleviation at least to it in the near future.
Thanks very much for that. Yes, I mean, it's a big issue. Eventually be controlled by electronic controls. I do wonder at times if speed is part of actual injury accidents, and I do wonder at times if the roads authorities should just have advisory speed limits, the green instead of red. If nobody's going to take any notice of them, perhaps we should just advise on the speed. But thanks very much.
I just wanted to say, just on antisocial behaviour, I've had issues in my own ward with people who are rural and feel a bit isolated to do with intimidation. As a new councillor, I wasn't sure whether this was the forum to sort of talk about that, but I can speak directly in terms of things, because there's a few people who are vulnerable, who do face some things, so that'd be great if I get in touch after.
Thanks. We have Alec Allison.
A resident dials 999 for a serious incident. The police don't respond to it either at the time or days later. That's not giving the level of protection or support to our communities that is required. And it wasn't a one-off incident. There had been incidents before that. We had spoken to Sergeant Dewar, or I had, and he'd indicated he wouldn't be able to put extra resources into the area. He didn't have them. Couldn't put in extra reports, and this was for ongoing items of vandalism, such as tyres being lit, being burnt, etc. So my first question is, what is the standards that you have to adhere to for a 999 call? Is it common for them to be ignored, as they were in this case? And what can you do in our ward that covers about 40% of the geographic area, and there is no way 2 officers can cover that? What can you do to give us the same level of service that perhaps other areas in the community get?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, again, I would really need the specifics of the incidents you're referring to there. I can't comment I can comment in a general sense to say that the 999 service is an emergency service. That I don't know many cases, I would say, or of any cases I would say that it's ignored. I think I can say for some surety that that's not the case. What happens in a situation with a 999 call, and this is me, I'm not an expert in that field, that's a different division, if you like, of Police Scotland that deal with that C3 division. But I do know that when calls come in, they are prioritised. In terms of response times for them. So obviously, if someone needs an immediate response, then that's prioritised during the course of that. And resources are dispatched when available. And the when available part is, I suppose, an important part as well, in terms of when people expect to see the police turn up at their door, fall and made a call. Now, Again, you know, I can't pretend that our resources are not stretched. I can't say that they are stretched. But some calls when they come in via that 999 system, as I was explaining just earlier to the councillor there, may be graded otherwise than an emergency call, depending on what it is. So someone's perception that burning tyres, unless there was an immediate threat to property or life and as a consequence of that, rather than antisocial behaviour as such, they would perhaps classify that differently from someone who had been subject to a knife attack or some other similar emergency. But what I see you have spoken to Ricky Jury, and I will speak to Ricky following this as well, just to see what the specifics are, the incidents that you're mentioning here. But in terms of the police officers that are posted to the can I ask you first of all which area it is you're talking about?
Ward 3, Dolphinton, down to Lead Hills.
Yeah.
Sorry, just go ahead what you were saying. It was not when the tyres were being burnt that the phone calls 999 was called. That was previous instances that were reported to us. The 999 call was when a group of youths were outside the house using threatening behaviour towards individuals within that house. So I would have said that was an immediate response required. There's nothing to do with the tyres, the 999 call.
Yeah, again, I don't have the specifics of that particular incident available to me, but if you do provide them to me, I'll give you a consummate response to that as to what action was taken in respect of that. And if the perception is that there wasn't action taken, obviously that's something I'll have a look at and see what the reasoning is behind that. But in terms of the officers allocated there and the number of, the community policing itself isn't a large team for the Clydesdale area, and I do appreciate the size, the geographical size of the area. But resources at this time, as they're apportioned, won't change. We won't see a lift in the amount of officers that are allocated to that particular area. All I will say on top of that is to be obviously aware that we do have response teams who are your first responders to incidents, etc., are operating from Lanark Police Office also, as well as other resources externally from Police Scotland that we do bring in via what we would refer to as directed patrols. When we have particular issues and particular problems, we will put action plans and requests in for additional resource to meet them. So if the circumstances you refer to are of an immediacy that requires that, then certainly if you intimate to me what the issues are, I'll certainly give you a consummate response to that. And if something requires to be done, we'll kind of lift that and move that forward.
Happy with that, Alec?
Well, it's an answer.
Thanks. We have Richard Elliott Lockhart now. Richard, if you just wait to speak until, give it about 10 seconds, I would say. That's you now.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, this goes back to the previous point. Speeding being ignored, which of course it is, we all know that. But the biggest problem we've got, frankly, and the police will be the first to admit, is your shrinking numbers. I mean, your police force has shrunk by, God knows, 2,000 or 3,000 people at least in the last few years. I don't know why, whether that's budgetary or just the result of centralisation, but this is bound to have affected the speeding enforcement. Now, my point really is that why are we so unwilling in this country to use speed bumps? Certainly in South Lanarkshire, I usually get sort of whinging, complaining, oh, this is not the way we do it, and speed bumps are anti-environmental and so on and so forth. But the reality is, if you've got less and less police and less ability to enforce, then surely to goodness you must look in another direction for your enforcement, one of which, and it's popular in every country I can think of in Europe, is speed bumps are not the silly little pimples in the middle of the road. I mean, a proper line across the road which actually stops people. And I simply don't understand why you are expected to uphold the law when you're not even given the tools to do it. And one of them surely is putting your heads together as police officers in all of the areas and starting to make demands, if you like, on government to provide the funding to produce more enforcement like this. I think, frankly, it's almost feeble, the fact that you are expected, obviously, to try and enforce things, but you ain't got anyone on the ground to do it. And I'd like to think that there's someone thinking further forward, starting at your level, who is going to force the hands of government to start looking properly at the simplest control of speed, which everyone else in Europe uses, which is a proper speed bump.
Thanks, Richard. I won't ask the police to comment on the speed bumps because Colin Park's waiting to speak, so we'll let him in on that one, and then perhaps you can explain the funding side. Thanks.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Chair, for kind of handing over to me. I did feel I should take some of the flack off the police. So, Councillor Lockett, thanks for that question. So, in terms of introducing speed humps and other infrastructure can control speed, we do have a kind of relative success story over the last, say, 5 to 10 years with targeted enforcement, where, and through liaison with our police colleagues, we identify, high priority sites. We identify the cause of the accident, some of which is speed, some of which is largely driver behaviour. And Councillor Lockett, if we were to tackle and introduce speed humps at every location where there's a percentage of people speeding, almost all of our roads would be covered in speed humps. And from my own personal experience over the years, we kind of moved away from physical vertical devices about 10 plus years ago, because for every one person that wanted speed humps, there was one or two who didn't. Different people in different communities like them, some don't, and they can be effective, and we have put them in. But given what my kind of police colleagues said as well, resources are very, very tight. We have a limited road safety budget available, and we are targeting locations where we have high profile, high numbers of injury accidents occurring. And when you look at I'm think Richard, I'm not sure whether you're on the road safety forum, you'll see that as a downward trend in our accident numbers. So even if we had a lot of funding, I still wouldn't be going to speed humps or vertical devices, as we would call them, as a go-to solution. It can be effective, but in terms of the policy that we have in place, it is to target high priority locations. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. Richard, are you happy with that answer from Colin?
Well, I've heard it before an awful lot of times, and I frankly just don't agree, because I don't know why we are standing out in amongst most of the rest of the smaller roads and larger roads in Europe, where, as you call it, vertical bumps or whatever you like are hugely effective, and quite often all they do is they put a big one at the ends of each village or town or whatever it is, and that just stops people pretty much from speeding. Now, I don't know. I mean, I've never subscribed. I don't like the council's idea. I mean, it's not South Lanarkshire, but you need a couple of good accidents before you start to deal with the problem on traffic. And I understand completely that you can't put things up everywhere, but I think this is a wrong policy which needs to be reinvestigated. And 10 years is a long time. Cars are faster, people drive faster, they don't know they're going so fast because cars are so efficient now you hardly know you're moving. I think this is something which requires to be looked at again, and I'm frankly don't agree with what you're saying in terms of making, this is a final decision. I think it needs to be reinvestigated, and I think it'll solve, I don't won't necessarily solve accidents completely, but it will solve part of your problem of lack of resources to be able to set up speed traps. I get 20, 30 letters, the street going down the hill at the bottom end of Lanark towards Kirkfield Bank. I mean, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour is no problem for some of those people. They come out of the high street and then they just put their foot down. They don't even realize they're doing that. And it's a lethal bit of road. And, you know, speed limits make no difference. They don't care, they don't hear, they don't see, they don't understand. That's the sort of area where you've got to do things. And I think you should not be ignoring that. Anyway, thank you. I've had my penny's worth.
Colin, do you want to come back or do you want to leave it?
Yeah, sorry if that's okay, Chair. Councillor Lockett, again, your points are all valid. I understand what you're saying, and I know you and I have had debate on this over the years, and we'll probably continue to have. There'll be a road safety forum, I think it's October, November, and what we normally do, we do bring a kind of policy type paper to that. So I think that would be the forum that we could have that debate. There's no final decision been made. You're entirely right. You know, policy needs to evolve, develop, be challenged, be scrutinised. Having the policy that we have in place is to ensure that the resources we've got are targeted effectively. Just to kind of put into context, we, you know, if we were to introduce, you know, an average length of, you know, traffic cam street through a village, you're probably talking 5 or 6 devices, speed bumps that you're calling there. That could easily be £5,000 to £10,000 each in terms of the device, the drainage, the lighting, whatever you have to introduce, and very quickly the small budget that we have can get depleted very, very quickly. Whereas if we just go back to, whilst we'd like to do more, what we are already doing is seen as having one of the lowest level of accidents. Still too many, but the lowest level of accidents that we've had in South Lanarkshire for some time. So more than open to a debate, and I would suggest Chair and Councillor Lockett, you know, probably the road safety forum later on this year will allow us to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Okay.
That seems like the right forum for it, Colin. Thanks very much. Do the police want to come back on the funding at all? Your funding from Scottish.
Hi, I think it's a very valid point that's been raised. We are operating in unprecedented times. I know there is work at a strategic level looking at the number of resources we have and the funding and equipment that we have available to us, and the results that we're facing through perhaps stricter budgets, tighter budgets, and limited resources, both in terms of our fleet, our equipment and our personnel. Although that's a piece of work that's sitting at a far higher level than the Chief Inspector and I are sitting at, it is certainly having an impact on Police Scotland. It is one that we would encourage all our elected members and the public to bear in mind and to represent Police Scotland in terms of how they speak to the government and they put that message across to them, and perhaps explain the impact that they perceive it having within their communities.
Thanks. I've got Ralph Barker now.
Right. Sorry, that intervention took us away from police work, which is maybe a good thing, but I just cannot let it go that speed bumps are a great thing, and I have to support it ahead of roads. Speed bumps wreck the snow ploughs, they throw hay bales off trailers, and they don't work. People just speed up between the bumps, and I often have to travel through Stonyban, which is West Lothian, which has them, and people just speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down, and the bike racers just see how fast they can go over them. So if we're going to have speed bumps, just let's try them in Lanark first. Thanks.
Thanks, Ralph. I agree. I've had speed bumps removed in Lanark before. I'd like to thank Police Scotland for the presentation. If you would like to leave, that's fine by us. I know you've got more pressing engagements elsewhere. Thanks very much. Oh, sorry, I had one question I meant to say. It wasn't a question, actually. It was just of the support that I've had from your 2 officers in Lanark recently. There's been quite a lot of antisocial behaviour with youths and have been absolutely fantastic. Josh Elwood and James Hunter. Josh, I believe, is moving on to CID, but I can't thank them enough for what they've done and working with different partners and trying to approach the antisocial behaviour that we've had. Thanks very much. Pass that back.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that, Chair. Yeah, Josh has moved on to CID, a well-earned move for him. Both very, very good officers, as you point out, and Darren will look to get someone to replace Josh of a similar calibre in the Lanark area. Just for your own information, yeah, they've been very successful in tackling some of the antisocial behaviour in and around Lanark. And some other issues also that have been happening up there. But there's some emerging issues that have been identified in terms of the town centre and also up at the bus station that Sergeant Ricky Jury just now is looking at also. So we're looking for some additional funding to put overtime into that area and some additional officers as well. So just so you're aware of that, that's ongoing as well.
Thanks very much. It's much appreciated, I can tell you. By the community as well. I know that you're working hard to try and solve it as best you can. Thanks.
Yes, and just one more thing, if I may, Chair, sorry. Lanark Police Office is obviously under refurbishment, you'll be aware. Now, that has, I suppose, a kind of negative kind of side of it, a perception of that, but I can assure it's extremely positive. It's a commitment of Police Scotland to Lanark area, and that money has been spent on that office. The improvements to that office, both at the front counter area, which makes it accessible for wheelchairs, and it makes it a probably more accessible area for persons rather than the side of the building. They enter from the front of it as well. So there's safety aspects to that have been thought about. So that and the additional interior refurbishments will bode well for the officers that are remaining there. CPT officers for Clydesdale, etc., will move from their current position, Curluke, to Lanark, and be permanently resident and working from there as well. So that is a great investment from Police Scotland in the area, and hopefully we can bring it online soon, fully operational. But just to kind of reassure you that whilst it has been refurbished, our response teams, etc., still work from there and still deploy from there to instances within Lanark. So there'll be no loss of service in that respect as well. But I look forward to being able to advise you when that's back online, and we'll have some visitations, I'm sure.
I just see that we've actually got another. We've got Julia Mars. Just a minute, Julia.
Chair, can I confirm that I can be seen and heard?
You can, Julia.
Thank you, thank you. It's difficult to know what the time lag is on the new system. Yes, thank you to Police Scotland for their report. It is very comprehensive, and it is a difficult thing to cover such a large geographical area as Clydesdale. And there is a reality that you can't be everywhere all of the time, and that particularly when we talk about driver behaviour, it changes when you have a nice shiny police car monitoring speeds and dealing with members of the public that are of a mind to speed. So I can't say I agree with very much of Councillor Lockhart's comment. What I would say in terms of the pseudo-political comments is that I'm well aware there are more police officers in Scotland than anywhere else in the UK. And whilst there are definitely challenges, we are in a much better position in Scotland than elsewhere in the UK. I would like to highlight the excellent work that Sergeant Jury has led with his team in Clydesdale in terms of speeding on our country roads in my ward, particularly in the areas of Wolfords and Auchengrey and Tibracks, Braehead also. I'm well aware of the police presence there, and realising that the small snapshot of time that you're able to devote to that area to try and highlight the speeding issues only gives you an indication of the issues because of the change in driver behaviour. But I'm also well aware of the excellent joint working with roads at South Lanarkshire Council with longer term speed monitoring and looking at what can be done, knowing that engineering sadly is not always an answer, and that as a much said trope, but very, very true, there is no engineering that can mitigate for inconsiderate or dangerous driving, sadly. But thank you, and I know it's an ongoing issue. I appreciate it.
Police Scotland would like to come in on that, or are you fine?
Still at the end of this, and I still can't get that right on this thing. But no, thank you very much for your kind words. Yes, and obviously, as Paul said, that the challenges are at executive level in terms of personnel and things like that. We're obviously working the resourcing side of that. The deployments within your area, as I said earlier, they will continue, but they'll be focused in a way that best suits the resources we have at our disposal. And all I would say to all councillors, probably in the more general sense rather than a comment in response to what you said in there, is if there are particular issues or particular persons who are causing those issues in terms, be it speeding, driving in your local area, then please identify them to us. There's various mechanisms that members of the public can do that by either phoning the police office or 101, and certainly via Crime Stoppers as well. And with that information coming in, we'll act on that. That'll form part of our targeting of resources, because as I said, it's important that we utilise intelligence, and I have to be honest, we really do need the members of the public to be on side with us as well, and councillors. This is not just something the police can do themselves. So we'll act on the intelligence we provide, and we'll hone our resources, and we'll put it to where the problems are. As you say, people quickly realise police presence there, and that changes behaviours of drivers. But then again, with enforcement, that is also what we're out to do. We're out to change behaviours of drivers. So I think, on both levels there is success there. So yeah, we'll continue to do that throughout Clydesdale, throughout South Lanarkshire and this subdivision as well. So yeah, please input to that. And just before we go as well, I suppose it's another opportunity for me to say the survey documentation here is available, if you don't mind, the councillors as well. If you can even put up the QR codes on your own websites, etc., and encourage people to engage with that. Certainly the leaflets will be left here in the council buildings as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
With your indulgence, I make one final point.
Yeah.
Just also off the back of the excellent work that's been done, speed monitoring in the smaller villages, I'm well aware of the good information that comes through the Lanarkshire Police Twitter forum, and details of where crime has been detected and dealt with. And I wonder whether, whilst the speed monitoring in the more remote villages is not necessarily designed to catch lots of people speeding and to dish out those tickets, I wonder whether the detail of that having taken place and whether drivers were spoken to or what the outcome was could actually be disseminated on your public social media. I think the publicity of you having been there is as beneficial as local people being aware of that.
On you go.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a very valid point. Social media is certainly a growth area, and one that Police Scotland wants to engage with more and more. We'll certainly take that on board, and we'll look to try and increase that presence and get that information put out there. It is, again, a bit of work that's ongoing in terms of Lanarkshire Division, both internally and externally, looking to promote the good work that officers are doing, to encourage innovation amongst the troops and the officers, and share good work, good information, good practices, but also trying to feed that back to the community through our social media. So it's a very valid point, and we'll work on that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just when you thought it was safe to go, we've got another councillor, David Shearer. That's you, David.
Thank you, Chair. As a Carluke councillor, I am interested to hear what the Chief Inspector said about moving resources to the Lanark office. I would seek assurance that Carluke's police cover is not being diminished.
Yeah, I can give you an absolute assurance that's the case. It's a relocation, but the actual service to Carluke won't be affected. Carluke and Law won't be affected by that at all.
Thanks
for that reassurance. I'll look forward to continuing good service. Thank you.
Thanks. So if Police Scotland would like to go, I think that's us now. We've no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it. And they've left those leaflets, so we'll get them into the offices. Thanks.
Yes, thanks so much, guys.
We'll move on to number 4 in the agenda is participatory budget. I should say just PB, because I can never get that word out. From Community and Enterprise Resources and Footways, pages 7 to 20. And Grant Newbiggin's going to speak to this report. Grant? Right, okay, Colin. Colin, that's you now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And I'll kind of follow your lead, Chair, and just use PB as well, because I can never say participatory budget in either. So thanks for your time today. The purpose of this report is to advise the Area Committee of the outcome and level of engagement for the PB exercise to identify where we're going to allocate 2.5 million of funding on footway projects. A wee bit of background, it's paragraph 3.1, following participate PB, we'll call it. Following the PB investment in carriageways and footways last year, a second phase of this investment is now underway, and that's focusing on footways. Paragraph 3.3, as was the case last year, the funding has been split across the geographical and operational areas in the first instance, which is seen for Clydesdale, just over $500,000 allocated towards footways. Public were asked to vote on 3 areas, 3 kind of key themes. 1, minor residential footpaths. 2 main and distributor footways, and 3 footways and business areas. The consultation ran between the 22nd of April and the 5th of June, and as was the kind of usual case, promoted via the Council's website, social media channels, and colleagues in the community engagement team pushed out via their third sector networks. 60% of the funding was going to be allocated to the top, 60% of the funding allocated to the areas. 4.3 there was allocated to the top scoring theme, 25% to the second, and 15 to the third place one. And the allocation, that allocation allows a proportion of the funding not just to be distributed to the top themes, but across all key priorities, and it provides a degree of flexibility to continue to target areas based upon some engineering merit, rather than solely targeting all funds into one theme, whilst obviously giving our communities the opportunity to influence the spend and direct a level of investment. So the results of the vote are shown in Appendix 1, and there's also equalities information in Appendix 2. Don't plan to go into a lot of detail there, but the key thing I would highlight is the actual themes where top theme was minor and residentials, same for main and distributor footpaths, and the third theme was footways and business areas, and that was consistent across all 4 areas within South Lanarkshire. In terms of next steps at section 5, just to kind of give a wee bit more detail, as I said, there was 512,000 allocated overall, and you can see in table at paragraph 5.1, there's just over 307,000 to footways and residential, 128,000 to the second place theme, and the remainder 76,000 went to the third place theme. The schemes in Clydesdale, apologies, a small typo in the report, they're actually listed at Appendix 3, and that lists the kind of works that we're doing. It also lists some schemes that kind of carried over from last year that we weren't able to complete on time, I think largely due to weather-related issues. Paragraph 5.6, we just note that given our already full and challenging workload, and I was very intimated to elected members by myself in an email, to ensure the delivery of both our core roads investment, which also includes some almost £1 million across the patch and footpaths. We had to start some of the works, obviously to take advantage of what has been up until the last kind of week or so, some pretty good weather. In terms of the financial implications, we do have 2.5 million across the whole council area for 22-23, and we are intending, and we have programmed and profiled all of it. We do expect some issues to emerge and continue to be there in relation to the supply of bituminous materials and a somewhat saturated market in terms of our subcontractor availability. However, every effort is going to be made to deliver the projects that are listed in Appendix 3, Appendix 3 for Clydesdale through to Appendix 6 for the other areas as well. For completeness, the report does also give a bit of detail on the £1 million core roads investment funding that's been allocated, and again the specific schemes are listed within Appendix 3 for Clydesdale. So just turning back to the start of the report, and the recommendation is that committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the outcome and level of engagement for the PB consultation exercise as set in the report be noted. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand back to yourself.
Thanks, Colin. Do we have any questions or comments? I see Lindsay Hamilton. That's you now, Lindsay.
Hi, well, this is strange. Thanks very much, Colin, for bringing this forward, and I particularly welcome Wilton Road Inkerlook, which after traipsing about for the election, I know particularly how bad it is, and the continuation, pardon me, of Station Road in Law. Sorry. So what I was wondering though is that the sorry, the participation of the
PB
exercise is particularly low, with only 200 odd people in Clydesdale taking part in it. I know from when we were speaking to lots of people on the doorstep, then it was a particular, especially residential footways, was a particular issue. So what can we do actually to make sure that people know about this exercise and actually participate in it better? Because obviously 260 odd people from Clydesdale as a whole is barely anything. And I do know that there is people that are particularly passionate about the issue.
Thanks, Lindsay. Colin, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and Councillor Hamilton again. Thanks for your question there. I'll give you time to get a wee glass of water there, I think, as well. I'll keep on talking until you get the water. Okay, there you go. So in terms of kind of increasing engagement, I would totally agree. Obviously, last year was really the first year that the kind of road service get involved in PB to any great extent. I mean, we did take some lessons learned, and we did push out some of the, for want of a better term, lower performing demographics, and we did see some benefits. I can't remember offhand what they were. I think there were some areas of East Kilbride that got a wee bit of a push. So clearly, for next year moving forward, we'll continue to raise awareness amongst our elected members via the kind of third sector networks, and all of the lessons learned from the kind of PB exercises obviously are channeled through our colleagues in community engagement. So we'll see if there's any innovative ideas. We wrote out to all community councils as well. So there's only so much you can do to encourage that engagement. What I would say is what was quite positive about this is, whilst engineers do not know everything, despite letters you might get from me kidding on that I do, we don't know everything, and it's really important for us to understand what the public's perception of where our investment areas are needed. What was really positive about this one on this occasion, I think we do as officers have a good handle on what our priorities should be, because when you looked at the results, and I know Grant's in the chamber there, Grant had a look at what the percentage splits were going to be, and I don't have them to hand, but they very much aligned with what the returns were. So 50-60% of the public that across the patch said residential streets needed investment. Yeah. That's kind of what we were looking to do anyway, and it's what we were doing on the £1 million core PB funding. And similarly, kind of, whilst it wasn't exactly the kind of the magnitude of the investment areas matched what the results of the survey were, but we'll look at pushing out more next year, provided there are some continuing investment in kind of PB areas, and we'll take it forward that way. Thank you, Chair.
Is that okay, Lindsay?
Yeah, just a quick comment of I do feel that particularly residential areas do need the investment in it, and I think that is the correct way going, because as much as, well, in Clydesdale West it feels as if we've got never-ending roadworks just now, but it feels as if the footways have kind of been left behind, So I do welcome that investment into the footways as well. But so thanks very much, and it would be good if more people did participate, because as I said before, it was a particular issue that came up time and time again when we were speaking to people during the election, and also what comes in our casework as well. So thanks very much, Colin.
Thank you.
I have Julia Mars, thanks. It looks as if your request disappeared, Julia. Do you want to ask again? That's you.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Yeah, I think it is difficult to engage with people and get in large enough numbers for us to be completely happy with representation. And without trying to tell my granny how to suck eggs here, but I'm wondering whether and the number of locations could be a potential issue here. But I wonder whether having QR codes, which are not a complete answer to everything, but QR codes leading to the survey for PB on lampposts in locations where there is on the potential for the voting is something that could be relatively low cost, but allow people who actually use those streets to know about the PB and engage directly in that. Obviously, people not without a smartphone might require to use another method, but at least it would be highlighting to those road users that there is the possibility of engagement on the matter.
Okay, Colin.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Mars, for that point. Again, we're always keen to look at new ideas to encourage engagement. I think my immediate thought there was with 60,000 lighting columns, it could be quite a challenging exercise to do. But let us look into it. Clearly, a message from both yourself and Councillor Hamilton there was, how do we try and increase engagement? So let's see how that looks next year, and we'll hopefully maybe come up with newer ideas. And stressing my point again that I genuinely think even if we'd went to a wider number of returns, we would have still get the same result. You would have seen footways at the top, main distributor second, and business areas third. So an increased level of engagement doesn't necessarily mean more investment in an area. It's specifically just identifying the themes that we then target on in terms of engineering judgment. And what we do, we take the kind of localized comments that we get back, and we feed that into the roads assessment process and inspection process, and schemes that come forward then start to get considered in a wee bit more detail for the following year's investment areas. But any other ideas we've got, myself and Grant and our obviously colleagues in the community engagement team will be happy to take them on board. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. Is that okay, Julia?
Yes.
Colin, I just wanted to make a comment because what worried me when I seen this PB, that I didn't want the people who can shout the loudest to get their streets done that weren't really needing done. But I spoke to Grant when this came out, and I was assured that it will still be scored. And I think that's important. But I don't want to raise people's expectation that because they've participated, that they should get their streets done then. And I think we'll have to make sure that we don't give them that falsehood that they might get their streets done should they participate.
Absolutely, I think that's important, and I think we've possibly got a good balance here. This is not just going to go to perhaps the community that's well organised and is able to reply in their numbers. That's not going to push a street to the top of the priority, because what should always, and I'm sure Grant will probably nod when I say this, what should always guide and inform investment is where it's needed the most. And whilst, as I said earlier on, we don't have all the answers as engineering and as officers, knowing where we want to direct that investment should begin to align with the priorities that our communities are coming forward with. But if someone has put forward a particular street in Forth Village, we'll start to investigate that over the coming weeks and months, and that will kind of go into our scoring system, which I'm sure Grant and others have written to you all on in the past. And that will allow us to see where that scheme sits in for future investment, either that later on this year or into next year. So your concern, Councillor McClyman, I think is valid, but I would give you an assurance that I think we've got a good balance here to engage with our communities, understand what their priorities are, but still give it a kind of a cuddle in terms of where the investment's going to go, based upon engineering judgment. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. We don't have anybody else waiting on the list here, so if you and Grant wish to go, that's fine, and thanks very much for your presentation today.
Okay.
We'll move on to number 5 on the agenda, which is the community grant applications, pages 21 to 24, and I'll invite Tracy to speak. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. There's just 5 grant applications. The recommendations in the report is based on the recently agreed new criteria, and it's just for members' approval if they approve the grants. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything to ask? I see Lindsay Hamilton. Thanks. Councillor Hamilton. That's you, Lindsay.
Thanks very much. Just the one for Curluke Menshed, just wondering the justification for the amount.
What we did there, we've got this new formula, it's 60%, but it's absolutely up to the committee to decide if they want to increase that amount or decrease it, whatever. So if you're wanting to say something different, that's quite happy to take that.
Yeah, so Curluke Menshed's moving into a new premises, so they're obviously will be needing more equipment, and it is a really good resource in the local area, so I would propose to put it up to the full amount.
I've got a proposal then to put this up to £450. Is anybody otherwise minded? I see Councillor Allison got and David Shearer, so I don't know whether Councillor Allison is wanting to come in this one, but I'll ask him anyway.
Sorry.
Alec, are you on this or is it something different?
Are we on the community grant?
Yeah, did you hear Lindsay's? Well, she wanted to raise the men's shed to 450, and we asked if there was any dissenters or anybody who thought otherwise. So are you in a different one or?
Yeah, it's later on in the
right.
Carmel Agricultural Society grant.
Okay, let's deal with Lindsay's her nomination to say that's to go up to £450, but I see David Shearer's wanting in as well, so I'll let him in because he might be in the same thing. Right, David.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to second Councillor Hamilton's proposal.
Thank you, David. That's fine. So that's agreed, £450 for the Curluke Men's Shed. Alec, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, it's just to declare an interest on, I don't have the agenda in front of us for the final grant claim to Carmel Agricultural Society.
Okay, so we'll do everything bar the Carmel Agricultural Society then at this point in time. Does anybody have anything that they want to change on? Well, you can't change the outing for Lanarkshire Federation, the Scottish WI in Carnwath, but anybody wishing to say anything different about Bigger Kirk or the Hare Krishna? Ralph. Alec, could you maybe switch your mic off?
Right, is that me on? Oh, it is. Thanks. Just to say, I notice less applications from the upper ward, the upper ward, which is covered by the Clyde wind farm community grant area. One of the few good things about the Clyde wind farm fund was funding for community councils in that area to decide on up to a £500 individual grant without too much detail being done. One of the few good things about that Clyde Wind Farm Fund, it wasn't easily given, by the way. Had to argue for it, and eventually, if people remember, Councillor Chris Thompson managed to get something for that. So at least that wind farm fund is taking some of the pressure off the rest of Clydesdale as far as community grants go. One good thing. Thanks.
I think that's correct, Ralph. The micro grants are certainly a good thing in the area, throughout South Lanarkshire, actually. Does anybody want to add anything to any of the other ones apart from the Carnworth Agricultural, or is everybody happy with what's been suggested here? Right, so we'll just prove everything apart from Carnworth Agricultural Society. Can you second that?
That's seconded.
So we'll need to ask Councillor Allison to leave at this point.
Councillor Allison, it looks like you're still present in the meeting. Could you leave the meeting, please?
Okay, so are we happy to approve or change or whatever Carnworth Agricultural Society grant for £567? Okay, so we approve £567.
Okay, seconded.
Thanks, Ross. So we'll get Councillor Allison back in. Bear with us, folk. We're just trying to find out if Alex got to come back in or not. It looks as if Councillor Allison's not going to come back in because we only have urgent business, which there's none been intimated, so we won't have any. So I'd like to thank all the members for their attendance and declare the meeting closed. Oh, sorry, it looks as if we've got two hands up here. Wait a minute. We missed them. Julia?
Right, I think that's me. Yeah, I'm getting used to this. I almost go and make a cup of coffee while I wait to come live. I'm wondering, Chair, that I know a previous Clydesdale Area Committee discussion was had about the information given to the committee for the community grants. I'm wondering if I know that there was communication direct to members, but I'm wondering within the body of the committee whether we can actually define what the agreement was, because my understanding, and perhaps I'm incorrect, that there would be greater information given to us about the what the intention was for the grant money and what the potential community benefit would be.
Hi, Councillor Mars. Sorry, I've not been at any previous meeting, so I can't answer that at the moment, but I can take that back for future reports for you. I'm not sure I'm covering this for someone else, so I don't know the background, but in terms of the more information being provided in the report, I can have a look and come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got Richard Lockett.
Thanks, Chair. Very briefly, a sort of extension of Julia's point. At the end of the last session, we were left with quite a lot of money, and it looks again as though, because of the lack of applications for grants, we're about to disappear down the same rabbit hole. And I just wonder whether we more or less postponed the idea of discussing what more we could do and how better we could use the available money for these grants. And I just wonder if that's something that you will take up, if you like, again, to see what we can do.
Thanks, Richard. We'll try and get that out through social media or whatever other means that Tom Little can do for us, but we'll certainly try our best to try and get rid of the money as best we can. Thanks. Ross.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the community groups that I've been to speak to, a lot of them have fell by the wayside after the pandemic, and I will be encouraging people, community groups in my ward, to apply. I think Councillor Barker's input about the wind farm funds is an important one, but I would be encouraging groups to apply for as much money as they can, because there was an underspend, quite a high underspend, I believe, from the last committee, from the last session. So I definitely think that that money should be used for groups that would benefit from it in our communities.
That's right, Ross. There was money left last year and this year. Last year's money has carried forward, which is not included in this paperwork. So I think all we can do is try and encourage people to apply. But I think COVID's still out there, and we used to have quite a lot of outings and things like that with elderly people, and they maybe just don't feel comfortable in a big bus yet. So hopefully things will improve. So if there's no more questions, we did get to the end, so I wanted to thank everybody for their attendance and declare the meeting closed. And I'd like to ask Tracy to stop the recording. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Use the new system.